Awesome. So welcome everyone. My name is Shifumi. I'm one of the co-founders of Collab. Before we begin this event, just wanted to share some house rules. So we do record all our events and we'll be posting the video on YouTube later on. And by attending, you definitely got your consent. We encourage you all to engage in the live chat. We would also have a networking portion after the talk where you can get to share your LinkedIn, talk to each other, reflect on the conversation. Feel free to share your takeaways on social media and tag us so we can understand how you're learning through these events. We also encourage you all to connect with one another during that networking portion and definitely have fun and be respectful. Tochi is here giving you his time and knowledge, so definitely be respectful whenever you're in the chat or when you're dealing with other folks. So for those who are new to Collab, just wanted to just share more information about us. So we're an online program for career switchers who are looking to gain real-world experience, and we believe the best way to do that is learning by doing. So we put aspiring product managers with product designers and software developers into teams to build products in 8 weeks. So we've graduated over 500 students so far, and we have an impressive career advancement rate because we all want you all to succeed in the tech industry. Our slogan is "You belong in tech," and you can find our alumni at top tech companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, and more. No one at LinkedIn just yet, but maybe Tochi is going to hire one of our grads in the future. But yeah, so let's get started. And I wanted to pass it over to our speaker, Tochi, to introduce himself to the audience and we'll sort of get into the event. So Tochi, over to you.
Thanks, Jake, for me. How's it going, everyone? Tochi, product manager at LinkedIn, previously at Google and at Microsoft as well. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And I'm excited about the conversation and just about learning more about what product is like that at LinkedIn and even just like diving into some of your experience, which you have a lot of wealth on. So could you just start off by just sharing more about your career journey? Like, where do you start from and how has your career grown in product management? So could you just like share that with the group today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we have these conversations with a lot of people about coming to the PM role, a lot of people assume that the PM role sometimes just gets laid on your lap. The journey into a PM role was definitely challenging. I started off my career as a software engineer because coming from a computer science background, that was traditionally the path everyone went into. So finishing my master's degree, I started off at Microsoft as a software engineer, spent about 2 years doing that. But I, slowly found out that sitting behind my desk and writing code and then going to play ping pong wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be not just an executor, but also in the room where some of these strategic conversations were happening. And I slowly identified that the ability to be able to combine strategy and execution was something that a lot of PMs did. So I set forth for the path to become a PM while leveraging the software engineering background that I had. And I know that, leveraging that technical foundation was going to be very helpful in the path that I wanted to take. So spent 2 years as a software engineer, eventually got a break into a PM role, Microsoft's cloud product called Azure, did that as well for about 1.5 years, and then moved to LinkedIn. LinkedIn was kind of my first experience in actually building 0 to 1, right? Which is basically LinkedIn does a great job of basically placing the onus and PMs to kind of define their path and define make strategic decisions around very unclear areas. Questions around like, hey, make DocuSign work with LinkedIn. And that's basically what the question was, and that's what the product problem was, and you have to go find a solution around taking B2B solutions and putting them together. So spent 3 years at LinkedIn doing that, took a little bit of a sabbatical at Google, or spent 2 years also as a technical PM, where I managed a team of PMs across platform products. Product I worked in specifically was Looker. My team worked on things like the Looker Marketplace, developer tools, and Looker APIs in their platform products as well. And then, spent 2 years and then boomeranged back to LinkedIn. Started up at LinkedIn when I was at LinkedIn the first time. I was an IC, now a manager of PMs, lead a team. across a wider breadth of areas, all platform products as well. One of the things I want to highlight as we have this conversation is you generally see that, you have two clear-cut types of PMs. You can have a consumer PM or you can have a platform PM, right? And I'm more on the platform side where I build 0 to 1 B2B products. Yeah, that's my journey.
Awesome. That's an incredible journey. And I'm sure that's a journey that a lot of people would definitely like to mimic or sort of follow. But now moving on to like 0 to 1, let's even just start by how would you define the experience of taking a product to 0 to 1? And why do you think that is important for product managers?
Yeah, I think it's, as a PM, it's important to first, you asked the question, why PM? It's important to first understand what excites you. A PM is one of the roles, if you don't love what you're doing, it could get quite exhausting because you're basically the nexus of every cross-functional area that makes your product just work. So, when you think about 0 to 1, a lot of the opportunity to be in the platform space. So for example, consumer PM might be doing a lot of iterative development or improving or enhancing an engagement or, driving adoption numbers. Usually what you find in the platform space, for example, is you're basically given a problem where you can create something out of nothing, right? Where something doesn't exist and you have the ability to create something. I had the opportunity to work on numerous of those types of problems, like make Zoom work on LinkedIn, or make DocuSign work on LinkedIn, or go build a marketplace for all of these integrations that people can use within this product. So, when you think about 0 to 1, the foundational aspect of just understanding that it's okay for things to be unclear, right? It's okay for you to not have all the answers. Like, where do you start? And being able to start mentally providing a structure in your head of, okay, I have a clear goal, and this is the vision, and this is why we're doing things. And then working your way backwards from there has always been my step. I can dive into more details as we have this in this as we talk about this in this call. But most importantly, it's important to embrace the challenge. It's important to embrace the clarity of where things are. 0 to 1 is not easy because it's very unclear. And you're basically, as a PM, defining for your cross-functional teams what the vision is, why we're even doing this in the first place, and where this thing is going. And having that excitement and using that energy and gravitating that across your team is very important because you don't have anything that exists today. It's basically something no one can see. So you're basically setting that foundational vision, that foundational energy that will propagate as you go through development. So yeah, that's basically, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And I think it's also very rare for people to have that 0 to 1 experience as product managers. And you even just talk on like the kinds of skills you get to gain or the benefits of even building the 0 to 1 product as a PM?
Yeah, I think, I touched on some of them. First of all, just loving the job and loving what you do is important because it could get frustrating. But also just, and I see a lot of PMs that excel well in 0 to 1, even in the consumer space or in the platform space. They work well with unclarity, right? Sometimes, Steve Jobs used to call this your product gut. You don't have the metrics, you don't have the data, you don't have anything that will tell you that what you're doing is correct. Maybe you've done some user research, maybe you've talked to some customers, but sometimes you go with that gut and you're comfortable with probably failing, right? You're comfortable with that not being the correct answer at that time. But it's the way you iterate through that as you go through the process, but also being comfortable with not having all the answers is one of the skill sets that you would definitely see in PMs that excel in the 0 to 1 space. The second thing is just, again, being a great cross-functional partner. One of the things I will say I emphasize is my flexibility across different personalities, right? And maybe if someone asks me what was my superpower, I'll say is people. And the ability to just, like I said, the energy across multiple cross-functional partners on your team when nothing exists. You're creating the vision. People can't even see designs yet. People see a goal. How do you sell that to them in a very crisp, clear way, while also getting them excited about where we're going? That's very important. So being able to do that is a skill set that is very important. And then finally, execution, just being an execution beast, because you're basically taking nothing to something, and every single step of the way has to be very clearly defined. It needs to be crisp in terms of like what the goals are for each step of the way, and also just making sure that, again, you're bringing the team along. So it's not just execution because you're doing it yourself. You're driving execution across like what the go-to-market launch will look like, what design is iterating on, how engineering is going to execute on that, and you're basically making sure everything is the synergy is just flowing. So I would say definitely working, in summary, just being able to work well with different personalities, working well with unclear, in an unclear space, and then obviously just being great at execution and emphasizing execution as well.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And it's with some of those tenets that we sort of even built our collab program, because we want people to go from 0 to 1, embrace that uncertainty, understand what it feels like to actually work on a cross-functional team and execute a project. And it's not easy. And you said so many, it's incredibly difficult, but coming out of it, you feel like so much better. You feel so much more confident as a product.
I think so.
And I've seen that.
I'll add to that just for a second. I would say, the results are very rewarding. Knowing that something didn't exist, and when it launched and you see it, and you're talking about thousands of millions of users are using that, there's no better feeling in the world, honestly, as a PM. And I know there's one thing I didn't call out, and people say, hey, you didn't talk about strategy. I think strategy definitely comes with that initial, you set up your vision and you're making sure that it's clear to the team. I just want to highlight that. You can't execute on a bad strategy. The why and what we're doing and the goals are very important. And being able to make sure that is clearly propagated across your team is important as well.
Awesome. So could you tell us about one of your favorite 0 to 1 products that you built from scratch, whether at Microsoft, at LinkedIn, or at Google?
Yeah, one of the stories I'll tell is, LinkedIn is building this product, an applicant tracking system. And, I was tasked with building a marketplace, and I'll explain what that means. You think about LinkedIn as a platform through which our recruiters, find candidates for jobs, right? But they have every other tool that they use outside of LinkedIn that they want to be able to integrate with their sourcing process. For example, Zoom for video interviewing, DocuSign for offer letter signing, Checker for background checks. So a lot of recruiters use a lot of other tools outside LinkedIn as they go through the hiring process. When I joined LinkedIn, one of the tasks I was given was to build an integrations marketplace. Literally, that's what I was told, with no definition of where I'm starting or ending. And, the reason why this is a very exciting story for me, it's like I felt like I was driving this startup within LinkedIn, setting that vision, kind of building the team together, even as an IC. Going to a lot of partner conferences and handing out my card and saying, this is what we're building and come build on LinkedIn, building APIs that will scale so that a lot of developers can then build into us, and we can have this robust nature of what we truly call a marketplace. So you can think about this as almost like LinkedIn's app store of integrations, where as a recruiter, you can go in and you can install any app or any integration and use it within your LinkedIn experience. And we wanted to go beyond just a, overlay experience. We wanted to make it very baked in. So as you're going through a candidate experience and the candidate is ready for an offer, while you're within the profile, you can send create an offer letter and send it to DocuSign, and then it comes back to you. So it was not just about creating this marketplace or getting partners involved or building something that scales. It was just this exciting nature of, hey, this is another thing that sits so seamlessly within LinkedIn and just works. So the reason I was very, proud of the results here is just, insane scaling challenge. Very unclear on like where we're starting, where we're ending. You think about all the different categories like video interviewing, offer letter signing, background checks, HRIS systems. You're defining each of these categories. You can open your iPhone and open the App Store, and you will see, games and, whatever all those categories are. You think about defining APIs for each of them so that each of these integration partners can then come in and build, and you can scale, and you define how that experience works within LinkedIn. I built one of, a lot of my greatest friendships that I still have today going through that 3-year process at LinkedIn. So that's one of the most exciting things I worked on.
Amazing. And what would you say is the impact of that project now? You spent 3 years of your career working on that.
Yeah.
What is the product today? And when you look back, what do you think about it, and how proud of you are you of building such a thing?
Yeah, I think that the proudest part is it's something that looked impossible, and we're able to get that in. What we're going to be doing in the future, and as much as I can share, is expanding that to a larger part of our product. So this is going to have even more of a mainstay presence within LinkedIn, a lot of more to come soon. But yeah, I think when you think about LinkedIn's foray into the talent space, being able to bring all the tools that our recruiters use outside LinkedIn and make it work, I think is one of the biggest achievements I've had in my career.
Amazing. So in your years of experience building several products from 0 to 1, what would you say are the processes that you follow carefully, especially in the early stages? So could you just share that with us?
Yeah, we touched in a little bit about the strategy. One of the things I love, even with unclarity, is going from unclear problem to alignment. And one of the things I dislike is not having alignment and moving forward. There's a lot of managing up, exec conversations, presentations, strategy docs that happens. And, obviously we gloss over these things. And, you don't just sit in a room and whiteboard something and everyone gets excited. You definitely have to go through the process of, almost evangelizing this internally and making sure that it's a thing that everyone aligns with. So I'll just answering your question, the process there is sometimes it's a clear problem that everyone knows needs to be solved, or it could be something that you see as a PM needs to be solved, and you need to basically sell people on it, right? Depending on that scenario, where you start might be different. So in the event, in the case where you have to sell people and basically get everyone aligned on what you're trying to do, there will be a lot of, for example, LinkedIn, we have what we call deep dives, strategy sessions, where you come in very prepared. You have this very concise doc on why we won't need to do what we need to do. But if you don't need to do that, and the question and the problem you're trying to solve is clear for everyone, I think that the most important part then is aligning on the vision. Remember, a problem statement is not a vision statement. It's basically, we know that there's this user problem or set of user problems that we need to address. And the vision is, we're going to take this problem and we're going to set a goal, and we're going to set a North Star, and we're going to set a vision about where we feel this should be going in terms of how we solve that problem. So the first part on that is just setting a clear vision. What do we need to solve, and where are we going with that? And the next part of that, and we've talked about that, is strategizing around that vision. Being it, where do we start? What market are we starting with? Do we staff for this? A lot of organizational, internal, external product strategic conversations then start to happen from that. And then eventually you get into what we call, initial development or thought process of taking that vision, taking that strategy, and what I'll call pre-development, right? Of like, you think about cross-functional partners sitting in a room and you're all whiteboarding. Okay, we're aligned. We know where we're going. This is something that we've agreed on strategically. How could we basically get this done? Some of the things that we've done on LinkedIn include like doing an offsite where we have 2-day offsites and like everyone's cross-functioning sat down and trying to define that. As a PM, you're leading those meetings. You're basically coordinating and organizing how that meeting is going to start and what the results of those meetings are going to be. I mean, a lot of PMs will give you different answers, but I would say most importantly at a high level, it's the alignment, it's the vision setting, it's a strategic definition, and obviously making sure that through that process, there's clear exec alignment as well. And the next part is what we'll call, the pre-development initial conversations as to what you're actually building, user flows, and you go through the whole, UXR research going into like actual designs and then development.
Awesome. So driving alignment is actually quite challenging. I can imagine.
Yeah.
It being like a huge challenge. What would you recommend if you're getting stuck to driving that alignment, or let's say you're working on a problem and it's not very clear? And I know driving clarity was one of the main things you recommended.
Yeah.
What tips would you give product managers who are still trying to drive that clarity and figure out that alignment with their team or with the exec?
One of the things one of my mentors used to tell me is like, I asked you about any product you're trying to build, and you can't give me a 10-second pitch and get me excited, then I don't think you're ready, right? And I always had that in my head, which is, how can I effectively sell this thing to someone? Not as a salesman, but like selling that vision. So I think that's the one thing. But in the event where, you feel like you're doing your best, you have your vision statement crisp and clear, you do tend to run into roadblocks for different reasons. It could be a technical roadblock, it could be an organizational roadblock, it could be, this is cool, but not now. There are different ways you approach the problem, you approach the situation dependent on where the roadblock is. What I've tried to do is understand the why, right? When there's a roadblock, why? And a lot of times you're able to answer those questions one way or the other. It could be this is not the right time thing. And then the way that could be resolved is, we feel this is the right time because these are the metrics that we're going to hit if we do it now. It could be a thing where you want to launch this thing during COVID or post-pandemic due to specific user engagement or adoption reasons. It could be an organizational complexity stuff where you might not have enough engineers, or you don't have enough designers to go through the process. That then becomes a separate conversation as to how you get there. And then the one that is very tricky is where someone doesn't even agree or align with where you should be going or what you should be doing. And I think the question then becomes two things. A lot of PMs start to question themselves, which is, do I have the right conviction in terms of what I'm doing because some exec is not happy with the path I'm going? Or do I want to clarify alternative approaches? One of the things I read recently was one of our PM leads asking like, hey, if you were in my position and you have this problem, how would you rethink it? A lot of the way I rephrase roadblocks is to just open up and listen and hear. And I do a lot of collation of different ideas and feedback and leading into what the final kind of aligned solution will be. Most of these things take iterative loops, but if you're following the right flow charts, everything will fall in place.
Awesome, remarkable. So let's actually even talk about that area of like trying to make sure that the problem that you're solving actually exists, right? So let's say you haven't been given that problem directly. It's up to you to try and figure out a problem. And now you're trying to convince others, even before you get to that stage, what can PMs do better to make sure that that problem that they're suggesting before they even form a vision, before they form a vision statement or a problem statement, what can they do to make sure that problem is real and it exists and it can add value to the business or to the customers?
That's a great question. You see a lot of PMs that feel like, hey, I want to do something exciting, so I'm just going to create something and try to make sure that it sticks. But a lot of good PMs will, one of the things that at least I try to do is, when I come to the table with an idea, I come with data, I come with clear metrics, and I come with not just one stream of data, but multiple streams with if you think about an if statement, like if someone asks this, then this data, if someone asks this, then that. And if I can go through each of those if else loops, and I'm still convinced that I'm ending with the same return statement, then I'm very convinced that I'm ready to have that conversation. You cannot have premature conversations in terms of like, trying to pitch something when you're not ready, and you can't back that in with data. But sometimes you just don't have data. You might have UXRs, you might have, like I said, research that tells you that that's the right path to go. Collating that and making it quantitative or turning that into an impact statement is very important. One of the things I'll say is you don't really get pushback on an idea, especially of companies like LinkedIn. You get pushback on things like timing or you might get pushback on things like, like where to launch something, or the process through which you go through addressing that problem. So, you can't just cook up a problem, if the problem doesn't exist. But what you can also do is say, hey, I'm seeing something that a lot of people don't see, and I have the data to tell me that this is a problem, even though a lot of people don't see that yet. Again, backing up with data or qualitative research that you can try to quantify, and then using that as, ammunition to drive your conversations is the path I've generally taken.
Awesome. That's super helpful. I really do appreciate it. So, a lot of product managers, especially early on in their career, they're usually just in charge of, small enhancements or just feature improvements. How would you recommend a product manager who's trying to gain a lot of experience? And I know doing 0 to 1 comes with a lot of, like, if things go well, it's easy to get promoted, it's easy to get noticed. How would you recommend product managers seek out that experience at a new company?
Yeah.
How can they set themselves up to be able to do 0 to 1 product management?
Yeah, a lot of people early in their career struggle with managing up. And, the importance of a manager who is very committed to your career growth cannot be understated. It took me 2-3 years into my career to truly understand that I can make requests in terms of things I wanted to do in my career. A lot of people early career sit on their hands, and just because they don't want to rub the wrong shoulders, right, and they don't want to rub people the wrong way. I think when you think about your career and your position, and if you're comfortable at that time. So for example, when I started off my career at Microsoft, I was comfortable working on those little features, because in every little feature I saw the ability to write a PRD, I saw the ability to work with design a little way and iterate through those loops. But then after a year and a half, I was like, okay, I've done enough of this. I need something bigger. I need something challenging. And the way you can approach that is, actually, before you get to that point, is manage your conversations, which is, I do feel I'm growing into this, and I would love that opportunity to try something else or own a larger scope of the product. And sometimes that scope just comes with promotions if you're doing those things well. I will also emphasize not jumping the gun, right? A lot of people want to own a whole product, but they haven't shipped enough features, right? It's like, it sounds big to own a whole product. I do think there's embrace the learnings along the way, but also be communicative and actually just be transparent with yourself on where you are in your career, what your abilities are. Like I said, communicate with your manager where you see your trajectory and where you see your career growth, and make sure those opportunities open up because you've clearly asked for them and you've clearly communicated where you feel like you should be going. That being said, that doesn't always work smoothly. Sometimes that opportunity is not available, or your manager is probably not willing. And like I would tell anyone, there's so many companies out there that will give you what you can. And I've had the opportunity to work in multiple companies in my career for various reasons, but I've seen a lot of really good PMs chase difficult problems. And at the point where I feel like I'm not being challenged, sometimes I go seek that opportunity, even if it's not at a present company. So making sure that first you can seek that opportunity internally, because for the most part, your manager is there to support you and help you grow. But if you don't see that path forward, also making sure that you're looking out for your career is also important.
Awesome. That's great advice. And for anyone out there who's curious to build a product from 0 to 1, you can always join the collab program. That's essentially what we specialize in. It's a chance for you to be able to get the experience to just like try to come up with something from nothing. And it's pretty fun. And I see some collab folks in the audience who are about to gain some of that experience. So I'm excited for you all. My next question for you is, when you're building a brand new product, 0 to 1, how do you even define the success metrics? Because it doesn't even exist yet. So what are the ways that you go about doing that?
I think they kind of trickle down as you build, but when you start off, you always have something that you're chasing. For example, it could be, we see a large, for example, I'll give a clear example with the integrations marketplace. What we're trying to solve was the swivel seat problem. A lot of people use LinkedIn in a different tab. So they were going back and forth. between like LinkedIn and whatever tool. Like I wanted to schedule an interview with you, I will copy your LinkedIn profile or your whatever you sent me in an email, and then I'll go to Zoom and try to schedule that, or I'll go somewhere else and try to schedule that, and then I'll come back and message you and tell you we're good or have something work there somehow. We wanted to solve for hiring efficiency. So the problem sometimes comes with a clear goal and a clear target. So the top line metric should be readily apparent from the start. I am trying to solve this problem because we're trying to address XYZ. Now, there are a lot of secondary metrics that come along the way. For example, one of the things that we wanted to solve for was, an authorization experience, being able to quickly enable these apps within LinkedIn. So the time it takes for someone to authorize is very important to us. Adoption, the amount of people that are actually using those integration apps that you built is very important. Remember, this was not why we did it in the first place. We wanted to introduce hiring efficiency, but to kind of like show that your product is successful, some secondary metrics will start to come along the way as you define what the product should be and as you define what you're going to build. Top line metric should be clear right from the start, and you start to define as you build.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah. So top line metrics and then secondary metrics sort of like come after that. So I also wanted to then ask, so you've worked on several 0-1 products, like you've mentioned. How has working on brand new ideas even helped you grow as a PM or helped you in your career growth, whether it's like moving within the same company or moving companies? So could you share?
Yeah. I'll say the biggest thing I've learned is patience, and just poise through a lot of very challenging situations. A lot of 0-1 product management, product development it's multi-quarter, multi-year stuff. And you can see a lot of PMs that might be launching features every week, and you're like, okay, well, my stuff is going to take like 2 years, right? And like, there's a lot of roadblocks and hiccups along the way. I think the biggest learning for me is just the personal growth and patience and poise and having some of these difficult conversations. If you have a multi-quarter, multi-year effort, it only takes 1 or 2 roadblocks for things to slip into the next year or the year after, right? And, it's important for you to maintain that poise through the process, maintain that patience through the process, but also making sure that, like I said, the execution hat is on. Like, if this is not the path forward, how can we move forward in other areas? Just truly, as when you're doing 0-1, the manager and product manager really comes out, because you're really managing a lot of things. You're managing cross-functional teams. You're managing the process. It almost sometimes could tend to be operational as well, because you sit in the middle of a lot of teams and you're trying to get things rolling. But for me personally, to answer your question, it's just the poise, it's the patience that I didn't have early in my career, because I wanted to ship. But I've understood the beauty in taking a step back, looking at things strategically, and just waiting for the right time to do things, because that's where you have the biggest impact for your customers.
Awesome. And do you remember a time, or can you recall a story where something didn't quite happen the way you wanted it to, and how has that like impacted the way that you do things differently now when you're working on a new problem, if you can share?
Yeah, there are a lot of times, for example, you think about, you're building something, especially in the B2B space. It's not like a direct to consumer stuff, right? You're not like an Instagram PM and you change the color of the button to blue and then you ship it and the consumer sees it the next day. A lot of platform B2B solutions usually have 3 layers. It's you, a developer, a second business, and then an end customer, almost like a B2B2C. A lot of times when you add that layer of complexity, it could lead to time delays. For example, we've been building a product with a top company, and the PM and the other team on the other company leaves, or there are layoffs in that company, and then things reset on your end. Yes, these things happen. But I think when you pre-plan strategically, understanding that some of these things can happen, you're still set up for success, because I talk about flow charts because that's the way I think about things in my head, which is, if this doesn't go through, then what is the other plan and what are the options? So yeah, Lots of time that happens, especially when you're building 0 to 1. It's not rarely you build a 0 to 1 without any dependency. It could also be internal dependencies across multiple teams. Something that is a P0 for you might be a P3 for a different team. For example, I might be trying to ship something on the recruiter side, but to the LinkedIn profile team, that's not the most important thing for them for the next 2-3 years, right? How do you make sure that, even if the priority is low and they're committed to a date, that things are still moving, and even if there's a roadblock there, you're able to accommodate. Things happen. I think just being clear on making sure that your strategic vision and the way you execute pre-plans for some of those things, is very important.
Awesome. And then going back to some of the things that you've mentioned about your growth, which is like a lot of patience as a product manager in your career, has that patience, working on 0 to 1 product, has that translated into like career wins for you that has allowed you to move forward to the next step or go to a different company or work on a different problem based on that 0 to 1 experience?
Yeah, it's allowed me to take a step back a lot of times, when I've had wins and really evaluate. It also allows me to not make rash decisions or decisions that, I feel it might make sense at this point in time, but, you look back 2 months later and you're like, I made the wrong decision. I feel like that has helped me to make the right decision so far in my career, and hopefully continues to help me in that way, because I know the space in which I operate. I always tell PMs, know your calling. Not all PMs are the same. Not all PM styles are the same. For example, you might have a different PM speaking to you at some point, and they might tell you different things. Because this worked for me doesn't mean it's a template that you have to follow. Some of the key tenets do stay the same, but the way you're going to approach these problems, could vary from PM to PM. What has helped me through this process as I've gone through 0 to 1 is understanding that you don't just build products in months. And it has helped me evaluate potential opportunities in the right way, and has made very successful decisions by evaluating the right time to jump into things. You've seen things, when you see things 0 to 1, if you are at like 0.2, where things are headed. Or if you're at 0.5 to that 1, where things are headed, because you've kind of seen things from a bigger lens.
Awesome. And so last few questions before we just hop into like our Q&A. And if you're interested in asking questions, feel free to put that in the chat. So, we also have a couple people in the audience who are trying to break into product management. So instead of building 0 to 1 products, how do you go? What's your advice for folks who are trying to go from 0 to 1 as a product manager to become a product manager and gain that experience?
Yeah, I would say for me, it took me 6 months, 6 or 7 months from the point when you wanted to be a PM to actually getting my first interview, by the way. So, it was a lot of knocking on the door. As a software engineer, the initial assumption was, you're very technical, so maybe you don't have the personality or the skills to become a PM, right? It just takes that one opportunity. And what worked for me was a lot of networking, was a lot of conversations and communication. And one of the things I'll say about, the PM role is it's very high demand, not a lot of supply. And being ready for the right opportunity at the right time is going to be very important, right? Because you never know when that opportunity will drop in your lap. What happened with me was a mentor had told me about a manager who was looking for a PM, and I had had a conversation with that manager, and I was told to interview 2 days later, right? If I didn't come in prepared to have those conversations, I read Cracking the PM Interview, I read everything, and I was ready to interview, and I was ready for that moment. What you'll see is a lot of PMs want to be PMs and they're having these conversations, but they're not doing the preparation on the side as well. So again, it's very challenging. It's very difficult. What worked for me was a lot of networking, was a lot of interactions, and just making sure I was prepared for the opportunity. I was also open, I had a, little bit of startup experience where I started a company with a few colleagues in grad school to kind of like dabble into what product management really is. I didn't take any opportunity and say no. Anything that looked like PM, I went for it. I learned from it and I embraced it as an opportunity for growth, even if it didn't really come with that title yet.
Awesome. So that's great. That's great. Like, advice for people embrace anything that looks kind of like PM.
Yeah.
Use that opportunity to like build, network, and be
Yeah.
prepared. I think most importantly, be prepared. So
Yeah.
that's super helpful. I know we have a ton more questions, but we're very short on time. Definitely wanted to give folks in the audience a chance to ask questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to please put it in the chat so I can ask Tochi. We had one from Sam Chen earlier when you were talking about the product that you built at LinkedIn with like a marketplace. He's asking, are these services part of the recruiter account subscription plan?
Yeah, so they do come up with a recruiter subscription recruiter account. So yes, if you have a recruiter account, you should be able to see this. The one thing that we're doing right now is actually LinkedIn had a product called Town Hub. We're going to be moving some of these integrations into recruiter at some point. Right now, they're only available for Town Hub customers. They've been using that for about 2.5 years now. We're figuring the right integrations to put in the recruiter space. So yeah, it will be, if not all of them are, they will be in the next few months.
Awesome. Any other questions? Again, don't be shy. Feel free to ask questions. Other than that, like I have some while we wait for a question before like wrap it up. What's it like being like a group product manager, at LinkedIn? Could you just tell us, what's your day-to-day like, and what is that job responsibility like at that level?
Yeah, it's as a manager at Google, and I'm also a manager now. I would say, it's LinkedIn's a great company, first of all. I would say being a manager is very different from being an ICPM because you're almost trying to influence a group of amazing PMs who are influencing a team, right? So it's almost that indirect. You start to become a little bit more strategic. You take an even further step back and look at things at an organizational level. So from a managerial standpoint, and the difference as a group PM versus a PM is just the fact that I have the opportunity to be a little bit more strategic. I'm not too into the weeds. I can help direct and lead a team of PMs as well.
Cool, awesome. Another quick, I know we have two questions. I don't know if we'll have time for them, but quick one from Sam one more time. He said, what would you say is the biggest difference between building 0 to 1 in a company like LinkedIn versus doing a startup from scratch?
Yeah, so our kind of startup was just basically a UI UX prototype. We knew a lot of at that time there was this uptick in apps and the iPad and iPhones, and what we'll do is prototype and develop and give it to a lot of companies to be able to just take it from there, because a lot of people didn't know how to code yet or build apps. But I'll say the biggest difference is just the psychological safety, because in a corp, you're covered by the umbrella of like, hey, you're working for Google Corp or you're working for LinkedIn. So your ability to take some kind of risk, although it's in a structured environment, you do that with a little bit more confidence than if you're a startup and you're burning through your own capital. I'll say that's the biggest difference for me, and it did affect the way we thought about things. But yeah, that was the biggest thing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, definitely doing a startup is definitely. Another question from Chris. Do you have any experience to share that your final product is quite different from the original vision, and what did you learn from that?
I wouldn't say it was quite different. I think there's scenarios where we iterated through the process where it helped, taking some ideas through an exec review or just asking people why they objected to specific things gave you a different perspective in the way other PMs might see things. So I would say I've really had the opportunity to launch a product that is different from where the initial vision was, but I've seen my initial vision kind of go through a few iterations that have changed from what I've initially thought. And, that usually comes with having the right conversations and being open to feedback. So yeah, I can go into details, but I don't want to waste too much time on that.
Cool. I know we're very short on time, so I'll take one more question. Ricky's asking, how do you handle emotions or circumstances if you get fired as a PM because the product fails? Does that ever happen? Do PMs typically?
Yeah. I haven't got fired, but I do know that I've had a lot of scenarios where companies recently have had to do layoffs, right? Because the overall product has failed or is not making as much revenue as expected. Emotions are tough, right? People are in different scenarios or different situations in their life. people have bills to pay, right? But I would say, one of the things that gives me confidence as a PM is my investment in my skill set, in my capabilities and capacity. I do know that, hey, weirdly, if something happens to LinkedIn, I do have an opportunity, and I've invested in my career enough where I feel confident in going to another company or interviewing for another company within a few weeks. So I think the emotions are there. You can't go away from it. The circumstances do happen, but invest in yourself is the biggest thing you could do, and potentially put you through that.
Awesome. I love
I can take the last one too. That's fine if you
awesome. But yeah, I like the point of investing in yourself and investing in your career. But yeah, you can take the last question. So Esther is asking, and after this we'll jump into networking. So Esther is asking, like that you mentioned, like PM interviews, it's been a struggle getting the PM role, or like getting an interview at a big or medium-sized company. What ways could you network, or what ways would you recommend them networking to actually establish that?
Yeah, I mean the non-shameless plug, it's LinkedIn. I do know that, sometimes just reaching out coldly on LinkedIn might not be the best thing to do, because obviously sometimes, you might not. LinkedIn has a lot of great features on things like, where people provide services or you could, one of the things I know, one of my friends who just broke into PM was he found a manager at, a company that was open to mentoring or open to mentorship. So as opposed to just reaching out to people that may not really have an open to mentorship or have that in their profile, I'll start with the ones that have probably highlighted that's something they wanted to get into. I would say networking through events like this has been important. A lot of people who have, reached out or networked with a person that is part of a company, and then, got to break into that company. What worked for me was networking within my company. So if you're in a company that has PM roles, networking with PMs in that company or with managers is also a path to go. I would do all those stuff before cold reaching out to people, because sometimes you may not get the best results. And then eventually, if you have to get to that path, I would say crafting a well thought out message. Don't just say, hey, I would like to connect with you because I want to be a PM. It's like, I've gone through this journey. This is my, story, as concise as you can be. And this is how I feel you can help me based on what I see in your profile. I'm happy to chat, just make sure it's polite and take it from there.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Tochi. Really appreciate all the gems that you shared. We'll definitely be turning this into a blog post, because you definitely shared a lot of gems in there. So we can distribute it so more folks can learn. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, Tochi. For everyone else, we're going to open breakout rooms now, so that you can actually network with one another and reflect on the conversations and connect with one another, and maybe network. You never know who you might meet. Fun fact, I actually cold messaged Tochi. That's how we sort of met, I think 4 or 5 years ago. So networking is important, and now we're here having a very amazing conversation. So
Awesome.
Definitely take a lot of those learnings. Have a good one, Tochi, and I'll be opening the breakout room.
Thanks, everyone.